Della Riker noticed the black SUV before she noticed anything else about the truck stop, and then she forgot about it, which was the first mistake of the night and almost the last one she ever made. She rolled in off Interstate 40 at 2:43 in the morning on a Harley that had seen better decades but still ran like something with a grudge against silence. The engine's growl echoed off the asphalt, scattered a pair of starlings from a power line overhead, and then she killed it, and the desert quiet rushed back in to fill the space. The kind of quiet that existed only between cities where the darkness was thick enough to feel, and the sky was so full of stars it seemed almost excessive, like someone had overdone it just to make a point. The truck stop existed because Interstate 40 needed somewhere for the weary and the lost to pause between Albuquerque and Amarillo. It was the kind of place that had given up trying to be anything other than what it was. Fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects above the fuel pumps. The diner windows threw greasy yellow rectangles across the parking lot. 18-wheelers sat in dark rows at the far end, their drivers asleep in cabs that rocked slightly in the desert wind. Everything smelled like diesel and old coffee and the particular loneliness of places that only existed because people were passing through them on the way to somewhere else. Della sat on her bike for a moment after shutting it down. Old habit, you did not survive 15 years wearing a brotherhood patch by walking into unfamiliar territory without taking 30 seconds to read it first. She cataloged two semis running their engines for heat, a battered pickup with Arizona plates parked crooked near the entrance, a minivan with a cracked windshield, and a child's car seat visible through the back window. A man in a gas station attendant's vest leaning against the building with a cigarette burning between his fingers and his eyes on his phone. And in the far corner of the lot, deep in the shadow where the fluorescent reach did not quite stretch, a black SUV. Engine off, windows tinted dark as ink, nobody getting out, nobody going in, just sitting there with the particular stillness of something that was choosing to be still rather than simply being it. Della's hand moved automatically toward her belt, toward the knife she had carried for 15 years, then stopped. She was being paranoid. Black SUVs existed everywhere. People slept in their cars at truck stops all the time. She was tired and she was scared, and she was reading threat into ordinary things because her brain needed somewhere to put the fear that had nowhere else to go. 6 weeks until the custody hearing. 6 weeks to prove to a family court judge that a 58-year-old biker grandmother was a better option for Sadie than a 35-year-old father who had failed 3 separate rehabilitation programs and currently had a felony possession charge pending in Bernalillo County. The logical answer was obvious to anyone paying attention. The law was not always paying attention. And Nathan had a lawyer who knew exactly how to weaponize appearance against substance, who could take a leather vest covered in patches and turn it into evidence of danger even when the person wearing it was fighting to protect a child. She climbed off the bike stretch joints that had been complaining since the Oklahoma Panhandle and pushed through the diner door. Brass bell on a spring, cheerful sound completely at odds with the 3 a.m. emptiness inside. 2 truckers at the counter, both staring into coffee mugs with the 1,000-yard look of men who had been on the road too long and were surviving on caffeine and stubbornness. A waitress moving between tables with the careful economy of someone conserving energy through a long shift. A cook visible through the service window, a cigarette tucked behind his ear, studying his phone with considerably more interest than the eggs on his griddle deserved. Della slid into a booth by the window, not to watch her bike, to watch that SUV. Her phone buzzed against her hip. She pulled it out with hands that showed every one of her 58 years, scarred knuckles from fights she had won and a few she had not. Calluses from decades of gripping handlebars through weather that ranged from desert heat to mountain cold. a thin scar along her right thumb from a night in Flagstaff she did not discuss in polite company. Hands that had changed diapers and thrown punches and braided a little girl's wild auburn hair, and done everything in between, all the contradictions of a life lived fully and sometimes badly and always forward. The lock screen photo made her chest tighten the way it always did. Sadie, 7 years old, gap-toothed and impossibly bright-eyed, standing in front of the Harley in an oversized t-shirt that hung to her knees, grinning, like she had just discovered the secret to something wonderful. Her eyes had that quality that some children carried, that complete and uncomplicated belief that the world was fundamentally good, that the people who loved her would always be there when it mattered. Della had been working very hard and at considerable personal cost to make sure that belief stayed intact. The text message was 4 words. "Grandma, where are you?" Della's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She started to type, stopped, started again. The truth was complicated in ways that a text message could not carry. She was somewhere between Albuquerque and nowhere writing, because sitting still felt like surrender and moving felt like doing something even when there was nothing specific to do. She was running from the fear that she might lose Sadie to a father who saw her as leverage, as a payday, as access to the trust fund her late husband Roy had set up before the cancer finished him 3 years ago. Running from the knowledge that courts might look at her vest and her patches and decide that a grandmother's love counted for less than a father's legal rights, regardless of what that father had done with those rights when he had them. Some conversations required more than text, required sitting across a kitchen table and looking into those bright eyes and being honest in the way adults almost never were with children, because honesty felt like burdening them, when really the dishonesty was the heavier thing, slower to dissolve and more corrosive over time. She pocketed the phone without responding. Another minute of that belief intact. The waitress appeared beside the booth. 60-something name tag that said Carolyn Eyes, that had the particular quality of people who had worked night shifts long enough to stop being surprised by anything the darkness brought in. She poured coffee without being asked. Good instinct. Read the customer. "You okay, huh?" The question carried no judgment, just the tired kindness of someone who had served coffee to the broken and the running for more years than she probably cared to enumerate. Della managed something that approximated a smile on a better night, just taking the long way home. Carolyn's tone said she had heard variations of that line roughly 10,000 times and believed exactly none of them, but she moved on without pressing. Some people wanted to talk. Some people wanted to be left alone with their coffee and the 3 in the morning quiet and whatever they were carrying that was too heavy to put down but too familiar to name. Della wrapped both hands around the mug. Heat through ceramic. Grounding. Real. She let her gaze drift back to the window, to her Harley sitting under the sick yellow light, and beyond it to that black SUV still unmoving in the corner of the lot. She should trust the instinct. She had been explaining it away for 20 minutes, and it kept returning the way pain did when you stopped focusing on something else. Professional positioning. That was what it was. The SUV was angled to provide clear sight lines to the diner entrance while remaining partially obscured from anyone inside looking out. She had seen that kind of setup before in different contexts in earlier decades, always with the same underlying geometry. People who were very patient and very good at waiting for exactly the right moment to do something very specific to someone specific. Her hand found the knife on her belt. She did not draw it, just touched it, just reminded herself it existed. What she was not ready for was the boy. Cole Merritt had been invisible for so long that he sometimes forgot what it felt like to be seen. 3 months living in the margins of truck stops and rest areas, the cold concrete spaces behind dumpsters where people discarded what they no longer wanted. learning the rules that nobody taught in school: be quiet, be small, be nothing worth noticing. He had perfected it the way certain insects perfected camouflage, not by hiding, but by becoming so completely unremarkable that the eyes of predators slid over him and found nothing to fix on. He was tucked into the narrow gap between the dumpster and the cinder block wall at the back of the truck stop. The smell was severe rotting food and old grease and something chemical underneath that he had stopped trying to identify months ago. But the smell also meant nobody came back here. Nobody wanted to look too closely at the places where the garbage went, which made it ideal for a boy who needed to be nowhere. His backpack sat between his feet, everything he owned in the world compressed into one bag with a broken zipper and a keychain shaped like a small dinosaur attached to the pull tab. One spare shirt, jeans with a tear at the left knee, socks that had long since abandoned any pretense of being white, a phone with no service plan that he kept charged at library outlets because deleting the photos felt like giving up something he might never get back. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag to protect it from moisture and dirt and the general hostility of the world, a photograph. Iris, his sister, 8 years old in the photo, which made her 11 now, the same age as him, somewhere in the foster system in a house he did not know the address of, being raised by strangers, while Cole was behind a dumpster in New Mexico, trying to remember what it felt like to sleep without keeping one part of himself alert. 3 years since that night. 3 years since he had stood in the doorway of their kitchen while their stepfather did what he did, and Cole's feet refused to obey him, and his voice died somewhere between his chest and his mouth, and his whole body locked up like every circuit had tripped at once. Iris was 7, then screaming from behind the kitchen table, with her hands pressed over her ears, begging it to stop, begging Cole to do something. And Cole had stood in that doorway and done nothing, and would carry that doing nothing like a stone in his chest for the rest of his life, no matter how much else accumulated around it. The social worker came the next day, took one look at the broken furniture and the blood dried into the linoleum and the careful way their mother moved as if everything hurt and some things might not heal correctly, made the decision that split the world in two neat halves that had nothing to do with each other anymore. Iris was young enough, undamaged enough on the surface to be placed quickly with a family that wanted a daughter. Cole was 11, old enough to be considered complicated, old enough to have seen too much, old enough that foster families looked at him and saw a problem with a long timeline rather than a kid who just needed someone to step in. He went back to Gary because the system decided a father with a temper was better than no father at all. He lasted 4 months before he ran, had been running ever since. The October night was cold in the way that New Mexico nights got cold even after days that had been hot enough to distort the air above the asphalt. He pulled his hoodie tighter and watched the parking lot through the gap between the dumpster and the wall, cataloging the way he had learned to catalog everything. Which vehicles had been there more than an hour? Which people were passing through versus staying? Who might notice a homeless kid versus who would look right through him? The black SUV had been there when he arrived nearly 2 hours ago. He had noted it immediately, the way he noted anything that did not fit the pattern. Engine off, but not because someone was sleeping inside. The stillness was wrong, too intentional. The stillness of something waiting rather than resting. Windows too dark for a civilian vehicle at a civilian truck stop at this hour. Positioned at an angle that made no sense for someone who just wanted to sleep undisturbed. He had almost moved, found somewhere else to spend the night. But then the woman on the motorcycle had rolled in, and something in the way she carried herself had made him stay and watch. She was older, maybe his mother's age would have been if things had gone differently. Gray threaded through dark hair pulled back tight. A leather vest covered in patches he recognized from news stories. The kind of stories that told you to be afraid of people who look like this. But Cole had spent 3 months learning to see past what the surface was designed to communicate, and what he saw in those 30 seconds before she went insane was not what the vest was supposed to mean. He saw the way she sat on the bike for those extra 30 seconds and read the parking lot the same way he read it. Methodical, deliberate, the practiced attention of someone who had learned that 30 seconds of looking could be the difference between a safe night and one that was not. He saw the way her hand moved to her phone and her shoulders did something complicated and involuntary, like a weight she had been carrying for a long time had shifted but not lifted. He saw her thumb linger on the screen before she put it away. That was a mother's gesture, or a grandmother's, someone who had people waiting for them, someone who carried something that mattered more than whatever she was doing out here at 3 in the morning alone. She went inside, sat in the booth by the window, and the SUV doors opened. Both of them, perfect synchronization. Driver and passenger, two men stepping out into the darkness with movements that were too coordinated to be natural, too purposeful to be anything other than rehearsed. These were not tired drivers stretching after a long haul. These were people executing a plan they had gone over until it was automatic. Cole's entire body went cold, not from the October wind. He had seen that kind of movement before. On nature documentaries he had watched at the library on winter afternoons when he needed somewhere warm to sit. The way wolves worked, the way they spread apart and angled towards something, creating geometry that removed options before the prey understood options were being removed. The patience of predators who did not need to rush because they had already done the planning that made speed irrelevant. His survival instinct said, "Stay down." Every calculation that had kept him alive for 3 months on the street agreed. This was not his business. Getting involved with other people's dangerous situations was how you stop surviving. He had learned that, had paid for the learning with cold nights and hunger and fear that never fully switched off. But the man on the right shifted his jacket and Cole saw the shape beneath it. He had seen that shape before. 3 years ago. Kitchen. Gary swinging it in wild arcs while the social worker backed toward the door and their mother pressed herself against the counter and Iris screamed and Cole stood in the doorway and did nothing and let it happen and had been carrying that doing nothing ever since. The man's hand moved inside his jacket. The woman in the diner had her back to the door, head bent over her coffee, no idea, no time. Stay down. The voice in his head was 3 years of survival compressed into 2 words. This is not your problem. You cannot help. You tried to help once and you froze and nothing changed except that Iris cried for you and you had to live with having frozen. His fingers found the photograph in his pocket, found Iris's face through the fabric without needing to see it, heard her voice from 3 years ago, small and absolutely certain that her big brother could fix things. Cole, do something. Please do something. The gun cleared the jacket. Cole's legs moved before the rest of him caught up. He came out of the shadows running sneakers, slapping wet asphalt, hard hammering, so hard he could feel it in his back teeth. Every survival instinct he had developed screamed at him to stop, to turn around, to go back to being invisible and safe and alive. He kept running, straight toward the man with the gun and the woman who did not know death was arriving from behind. The word came out of him like something tearing loose from the place where it had been stuck for 3 years. Gun, 1 syllable. Cracked down the middle. 11-year-old vocal cords not designed for the volume of everything he was trying to push through them. But it was enough. The shooter's head snapped toward the sound. The barrel tracked away from the diner window. Time did something strange, slowing and speeding simultaneously, every detail hyper-real and crystalline, the man's face-turning expression shifting from focused calm to irritated confusion, the gun swinging toward Cole instead of the woman, and inside the diner, the woman's head coming up, eyes widening, body already moving. The shooter's finger found the trigger. Cole was still running forward, still moving toward the gun even though it was now pointed at him, because turning back meant going back to being the boy who stood in the doorway, and he would rather catch a bullet moving forward than live one more day inside that particular version of himself. The shot was louder than he expected. The sound bounced off concrete and metal and asphalt and seemed to arrive from everywhere at once. Birds scattered from somewhere overhead. An alarm went off on one of the parked trucks, then the fire. It detonated through his left side just below his ribs and spun him sideways, feet tangling the parking lot, tilting 90 degrees faster than physics should have allowed. He hit the asphalt with his shoulder and hip pain fracturing through him in waves. And for half a second, he thought he had just fallen, just stumbled in the dark and gone down hard. Then the warmth started spreading. He lay on his back and looked up at the parking lot lights and understood what had happened. The warmth was his blood moving outward through fabric, spreading faster than warmth should spread. But he had moved. He had screamed. He had not stood in the doorway. For the first time in 3 years, when Iris's voice had asked him to do something, he had done it. Above him, the lights buzzed and flickered. Little dying stars in a universe that had never noticed whether he existed or not. And he thought not with fear, but with something that felt almost like arriving at a place he had been walking toward for a long time, that at least he knew now. At least he knew he could move when it mattered. Della moved the instant she heard the word. 15 years of brotherhood had trained her body to respond to threat before her mind finished processing what kind of threat it was. She dropped below the window line as the first shot punched through the space where she had been sitting, took out a section of the neon sign above the diner, showered her with glass. She was already moving. Out of the booth, knife in hand, through the door and into the parking lot in one continuous motion that her joints would register their objections to later, if later arrived. The second shooter was coming around the corner of the building. She went at him low and hard shoulder, connecting with his ribs, putting all 135 pounds of her behind it. His shot went into the sky. They hit the asphalt together, and she pressed the flat of the blade against his forearm. Not deep, just enough to make the message very clear, and the gun fall. The SUV's engine roared. Tires screamed. The first shooter scrambling back inside, clutching something at his wrist. The vehicle fishtailed across the lot and was gone, taillights disappearing onto the interstate ramp at a speed that told her they had an extraction route planned before the night began. She let them go. The boy was on the asphalt 20 feet away. Della crossed to him at a run and dropped to her knees beside him. He was small, impossibly small for what he had just done. Couldn't be more than 11 or 12. Wearing a hoodie so thin she could see daylight through it in places, sneakers with the soles beginning to separate jeans with dirt ground into the fabric from long nights on hard ground. The kind of kid that the world looked through instead of at. The kind of kid who existed in the peripheral vision of everyone who was busy with something that felt more important. He was staring up at the parking lot lights with eyes that were working very hard to stay focused. Each breath came shallow and sharp. His left side was dark with spreading wetness that looked black under the sodium vapor lights, but that Della knew the color of. She pressed both hands into the wound, hard, the way she had been taught in a first aid class a decade ago that she had never expected to need quite like this. "Stay with me." Her voice came out harder than she intended. The voice she used when someone needed to be in charge and she was the available option. "Look at me. What's your name?" His eyes rolled toward her, struggled to find her face and hold it. His lips moved and the sound that came out was thin, but it was there. Cole. She filed it away. Made it real. He was a specific person with a name and not an anonymous tragedy. I'm Della. You just stepped in front of a bullet for a stranger. Why? The question was not fair. She knew that. But she needed to understand what would make a child throw himself between a gun and a woman he had never met, because understanding it felt important in a way she could not yet fully articulate, like something she would need to carry carefully if she was going to carry it right. His answer came in fragments, words separated by the effort of breathing around the pain. Because nobody stepped in for my mom. Because my sister begged me to do something and I froze. Because I've been frozen for 3 years and I couldn't stand one more day of it. Each word landed in Della like something thrown hard and precisely aimed. She saw it all in the spaces between his sentences. Saw the guilt that children carried when they were put in impossible positions by adults who should have protected them instead. Saw the particular torture of having been paralyzed when someone needed you to move. Saw herself in miniature different biography, same essential shape of wound. Someone should have stopped it, he said, for my family. Nobody did. Sirens in the distance, red and blue light already painting the eastern horizon. Della leaned forward until her face was close enough to his that he could not look away. Close enough that her words would reach even through the fog that was starting to cloud his focus. You listen to me, Cole. Her voice dropped to something fierce and deliberate and meant to last. You didn't save some random stranger tonight. You saved a grandmother. If I died out there, my granddaughter goes back to a father who can't take care of himself, let alone a 7-year-old girl. You didn't just save me, you saved her future. Both of them. All of it. His vision was going. She could see it happening in real time, the edges of his focus softening his skin, going the color of something that had given too much of itself away. But his lips moved one more time. Did I at least do something right this time? The voice of a child who had been telling himself for 3 years that he was the kind of person who stood still when it mattered. Della gripped his hand, kept the other one pressed hard against his side, made absolutely sure he could hear what came next. You did more than right. You did what most grown men won't. And in my world, that means everything. The paramedics arrived running. Someone in the diner had called the moment the first shot went off. They came with a particular focus chaos of people trained to manage crisis voices, overlapping equipment, rattling hands reaching. Someone tried to move Della aside. She made a sound that stopped the attempt immediately. I've got the bleed. You get the line in. They looked at her hands already doing the work, looked at her face, made the calculation that some arguments were not worth the time. They worked around her, lifted Cole onto the stretcher with care that physics did not cooperate with, and she watched him take the pain of movement inside himself, rather than letting it out, swallowing it, absorbing it, which was all wrong. 11-year-old boys should be allowed to scream when they were hurt, should have adults whose function was to make pain stop rather than cause it. The ambulance doors opened. Della climbed in without asking permission. Ma'am, the paramedic's voice had the beginning of an objection in it. He saved my life. Her voice was steel and absolute certainty. That makes him mine. I'm not leaving. The paramedic looked at her vest, at her hands still dark with Cole's blood, made a calculation about which battles were worth the energy. Fine. Stay out of the way. She wedged herself into the corner and watched them work. IV line going in, oxygen mask, pressure bandages, a young paramedic doing everything correctly with the mechanical precision of someone executing training and still unable to guarantee the outcome that the training was designed for. She pulled out her phone, blood smeared across the screen. She navigated to the contact by feel. Holt McKay, president of the New Mexico chapter, the man who had given her a patch 15 years ago when she walked into the clubhouse with nothing but bruises and a need to belong somewhere that did not require her to be smaller than she was. The line rang twice. A rough voice answered thick with sleep. This better matter. I'm calling the oath. Silence. Then Holt's voice changed completely, sleep stripped away like a coat coming off. You sure we don't invoke that lightly? Della looked at the boy on the gurney, pale as something that had given too much of itself away, breathing assisted by a machine, alive because he had decided that moving was worth the cost. A kid named Cole just took a bullet meant for me. Someone tried to kill me tonight. Professional hit. Two shooters, black SUV, they knew exactly where I'd be and when. Nathan. Holt didn't make it a question, has to be. Gets me out of the way, gets Sadie, gets the inheritance and the trust fund and everything Roy built. Where are you? Ambulance heading to Albuquerque Medical. The boy is critical. I'll make the calls. By sunrise, he doesn't wake up alone. You understand what you're starting, Della. Once the oath is invoked, the whole brotherhood knows. This doesn't stay contained. She understood exactly what she was starting. The sacred obligation was not a casual thing. It was a declaration, an announcement to everyone who understood the language that a person outside the brotherhood had done something so significant they were now inside it permanently, whether they wanted to be or not. That their life was now woven into the fabric of the code, that anyone who came for them came for all of them. It meant Cole would never be invisible again for better or worse, whether he was ready for it or not. Do it, she said. She hung up, reached into her jacket pocket with her free hand. Her fingers found the piece of paper she had grabbed in the chaos of the parking lot when she was moving fast, and her hands were working on instinct, and she had pulled it from the second shooter's jacket without fully consciously deciding to. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise, the kind of precision that belonged to someone who took their planning seriously. Eliminate subject. Son inherits estate plus full custody of minor child. Payment on confirmation. Della read it twice, let it settle. Her son, the boy she had raised and sat with through 2 rehabilitation programs and paid for a third, and visited in county lockup, and bailed out of situations that would have destroyed someone without a mother fighting for them. Nathan had looked at her and performed the calculation and decided she was worth more to him dead than alive, had hired professionals to solve that problem cleanly. The rage that moved through her was not the hot kind, not the kind that exploded and made noise. It was the cold, calculating kind that built plans with the same precision as the handwriting on the note, the kind that did not stop. First, she had to make sure this boy lived, had to honor the oath, had to prove that when someone stepped in for you, you did not let it mean nothing. The hospital materialized out of the desert dark, white building against black sky, emergency entrance blazing with light. They wheeled Cole inside at a run. Della followed until a nurse stepped into her path. Family only past this point. I'm all he's got. It might have been the most completely honest thing as she had said all night. The nurse looked at her, at the vest, at the blood on her hands, at the set of her jaw that indicated this was a conversation with one possible conclusion. Waiting room is through there. We'll find you when we know something. It was not permission, but it was not refusal either. Della would take it. The waiting room was the particular purgatory that hospitals had been perfecting for decades. Chairs designed to discourage comfort. Fluorescent lights at a frequency that made everyone look slightly unwell. A television with the sound off cycling through news nobody was watching. Coffee from a machine in the corner that tasted like regret dissolved in hot water, and served without apology. Della paced, could not sit. Sitting felt like surrendering to a situation she was supposed to be managing. Her phone buzzed. Holt, word is out. Brothers rolling. How many do you need? As many as can ride. You'll have them. Sunrise full chapter. Anyone close enough is already moving. She paced, and the night moved slowly in the way that nights moved when you were waiting for something that had not happened yet and might go either way. Dawn came through the waiting room windows, gradually light that was afraid of what it might find. Della watched the sky go from black to deep blue to the tentative gray that preceded actual morning, and outside the parking lot began to fill, not with cars. They arrived in pairs first, then clusters, then a steady stream that built on itself. Harleys and custom builds and choppers that sounded like controlled weather. Chrome and leather and the particular thunder of engines that had been tuned and retuned over years of hard highway miles. They parked in neat rows with military precision, each bike placed deliberately, the whole assembly taking on the shape of something organized around a purpose. Della walked to the window and counted without meaning to. 20, 40, 60, still coming. Men and women swinging off bikes, some of them with the look of people who had been on the road for hours, some with coffee cups still in hand from wherever they had stopped for fuel. Different chapters, different states, different decades of the same code. A nurse appeared at Della's shoulder and stared at the parking lot in silence for a long moment. What is happening out there? A sacred obligation, Della said. For anyone who understood what that meant, it explained everything. Holt walked through the emergency entrance at 7:15. 62 years old, with more scar tissue than smooth skin, and eyes that had absorbed a significant portion of the worst that people could do and had occasionally witnessed something better. He crossed to Della in 4 strides. How many, she asked. Last count 940, still climbing. Got brothers from Arizona, Colorado, Texas. Word moves fast when the oath gets called. 940 people for a boy they had never met, because one of their own had said he mattered. Della's eyes burned. She managed it. He's still in surgery. Holt's jaw set. He's got 940 reasons to make it. A doctor came through the double doors. Young, tired. He scanned the waiting room and Della was already moving. Cole Merritt, I'm his family. The doctor took in her vest, the dried blood under her fingernails, the complete absence of doubt in her face. He decided not to challenge the claim. He's out of surgery. Bullet went through clean, missed the major organs. We've repaired the damage and given him 2 units of blood. He's stable. Della heard the word that had not been said yet. She waited. But he's severely malnourished and dehydrated. His immune system was already compromised before tonight. We're keeping him sedated to let his body focus on healing. The next 48 hours are critical. If infection establishes itself, the variables change significantly. Can I see him? The doctor looked out at 940 motorcycles parked in his hospital's lot. Made a decision that was going to generate some administrative conversation later. 5 minutes. The ICU was very quiet in the way that spaces full of machines doing critical work were quiet. Cole looked impossibly small in the bed surrounded by equipment that was disproportionately large, all of it keeping him tethered to the side of the line he needed to be on. His skin was pale against white sheets. His chest rose and fell with the machine's rhythm, but it rose and fell. Della pulled a chair close, took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. You're gonna make it, she told him. She said it like fact, like her conviction could function as physics. You're going to wake up and you're going to see something you've probably never seen before in your life. People who gave a damn, people who showed up. She did not know if any part of him could hear. It did not change what needed to be said. I don't know your whole story yet. Don't know what put you on that street or who failed you or how long you've been surviving it alone, but I know what you did tonight, and I know that created something between us that doesn't expire." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at it. "This is Elizabeth Greer from New Mexico Child Protective Services. I've been assigned to Sadie Riker's case. I need to speak with you immediately regarding an emergency custody motion filed this morning by Nathan Riker." The words hit like the bullets that had missed her, each one finding its specific target. She dialed. Elizabeth answered on the second ring, professional, careful. "Ms. Riker, what motion?" "Nathan Riker filed an emergency petition this morning, claiming you were involved in a gang-related shooting. He's arguing that Sadie is in immediate danger. A judge has granted a temporary order. Sadie has been placed in 72-hour emergency foster care pending a full hearing." "He tried to have me killed last night," Della said. Voice flat. "Two professional shooters. The only reason I'm alive is because a homeless boy saw them coming and took a bullet for me. I pulled a note from the shooter's jacket. Eliminate subject. Son inherits estate plus full custody of minor child. That is not an allegation. That is a document." Silence. "Then carefully, I need to see that note and I need a full statement. I'm at the hospital with the boy who saved my life. He is 11 years old and he almost died because my son decided I was worth more gone than present. I'll come to you. Don't leave the hospital. Don't contact Nathan. Don't do anything that could be characterized as aggressive or threatening. The next 72 hours are critical for both situations." The line went dead. 72 hours to build a case that would bury Nathan before a judge made Sadie's foster placement permanent. Before a 7-year-old girl ran out of faith that the people who loved her were actually coming. Her phone buzzed again. Holt. "News crews just showed up. Someone tipped them about the bikers. They're already framing it as gang activity. This could be used against you in court. Tell everyone to clear out. Last thing I need is footage that gives Nathan's lawyer ammunition. You sure we came for you, for the kid?" "I know, and I'm grateful. But the best thing right now is to not hand them the narrative they're looking for." Brief silence. "All right, we'll roll. But Della, the protection doesn't expire because it's inconvenient. That boy's under the oath. So are you. Nathan comes at either of you. Again, he comes through all of us." She put the phone away and looked at Cole. Still fighting, still here. She was done playing defense. She had spent 3 years fighting Nathan through proper channels, being measured and respectable, and everything a family court wanted a grandmother to look like. Nathan had responded by hiring killers. It was time to stop playing by rules that kept changing depending on who was making them. She stood, kissed Cole's forehead. "Rest. Heal. When you wake up, I'll still be here and we're going to show them what happens when they underestimate people who've got nothing left to lose except each other." Then she walked out of the ICU, through the waiting room, into the parking lot, where the last of the motorcycles were pulling out in a slow, controlled procession. The ground still vibrated with the memory of nearly 1,000 engines. Holt waited beside his bike. "What do you need?" he asked. "Information. Everything on the two shooters who connected them to Nathan, what was promised. Fast. I've got 72 hours before a judge decides Sadie's foster placement is permanent." Holt's mouth did the thing that was not quite a smile but had the quality of a decision made. Offense, then. Della climbed onto her Harley, felt the familiar weight of it, the specific and irreplaceable sensation of being in exactly the place she was supposed to be, kicked it to life. The engine spoke deep and certain and completely indifferent to whatever was in the way. Somewhere 300 miles away, a 7-year-old girl was waking up in a stranger's house, wondering if the promises she had been given were the kind that held. "Hold on, Sadie. Grandma's coming." Cole woke to pain, not the sharp, specific kind that the bullet had been. That had a location and a cause and a moment of origin. This was diffuse and deep, a grinding ache that lived in the left side of his body and pulsed with every heartbeat like a tenant who had moved in uninvited and was not planning to leave quickly. White ceiling. Machines making sounds that meant things he did not know how to read. A smell of antiseptic working hard to cover something organic underneath. Blankets that were heavy and clean and warm in a way that took him several seconds to identify because he had not experienced it in long enough that his body needed a moment to remember what it was. Easy, Della's voice, low and certain. You've got stitches and staples holding you together. Sudden movement is a bad idea right now. He turned his head slowly. She was in the chair beside the bed exactly where she had been when he lost consciousness in the ambulance. Or maybe she had never moved. Or maybe she had moved and come back. She still had the leather vest on, still had the road-worn look of someone who had not slept. But her eyes were sharp and present in a way that indicated she had made a decision about what came next and was ready to talk about it. How long? 36 hours since surgery. You've been in and out, mostly out. The doctors say you're going to make it. She paused. You had 940 people show up to make sure you didn't wake up alone. Cole processed that number, could not fit it into a framework that made sense. Why? Because I called in an oath. In my world, that's a promise that has weight. You saved my life. Where I come from, that creates a debt that people take seriously. 940 people showing up to sit in a hospital parking lot is what that looks like in the early stages. Early stages. We have problems, both of us, and I need your help if you're willing to give it. He should have said no. 3 months on the street had produced a very functional set of rules about not getting further involved in other people's dangerous situations, and every one of those rules applied here. But Iris's face was in his head, and the feeling from the parking lot, the feeling of finally moving, when it mattered, of finally being the version of himself he had wanted to be for 3 years. He was not ready to give that back. What kind of problems? Della told him everything. Nathan's attempt on her life, Sadie in emergency foster care, the 72-hour clock that had been burning while Cole was unconscious, a hitman named Roman Voss still somewhere in the city, a custody hearing that would determine whether a 7-year-old girl grew up with someone who loved her or someone who saw her as leverage. When she finished, Cole was quiet for a while, working through it the way he had learned to work through situations that had multiple moving pieces, identifying angles and pressure points and what information would change the picture. You need evidence, he said. Audio or video, something a court can use. Your word against Nathan's attorney without it. That's where you come in. You spent 3 months being invisible, moving through the world without being noticed. I need those skills. I need someone who can get close to Nathan without him knowing it. You want me to follow your son. I want you to help me protect my granddaughter. She showed him the photo on her phone. Sadie gap-toothed and grinning, completely unaware that the world contained people who saw her as a financial instrument. She's 7. She's with strangers right now, wondering if I forgot about her. Cole looked at the photo, saw Iris underneath it. If I help you, he said, you help me find my sister. Della did not pause. Yes, if Nathan or his people figure out what I'm doing, if it goes wrong, then they go through us first. Full weight of the brotherhood. Anyone who touches you answers to everyone. That's what the oath means. It does not have exceptions. She said it the way you stated something that was true, the way gravity was true. Not a promise about intention. A statement about what existed. Okay, tell me what you need. Vera Strand arrived an hour later with a laptop bag and the focused energy of someone who had been awake for the same 36 hours as Della and had spent them doing useful work. Mid-40s, red hair going silver at the temples, tattoos on both forearms in designs too detailed to read quickly. She moved with the economical awareness of someone trained somewhere that taught you to understand the architecture of every room you entered. She studied Cole with the same comprehensive attention she probably gave electronics she was about to work with. Heard you took a bullet for Diesel. Diesel, Della's road name, Vera said. Real name Della, but on the bike she's Diesel. She earned it riding 400 miles through a desert sandstorm to get to her husband before the cancer took him. Made it with 20 minutes to spare. She looked at Cole. You earned something too with what you did in that parking lot, but road names come when you're patched in. Right now you're Cole. I don't want to patch. Didn't say you did. The protection's yours regardless. The oath isn't something you can return. Vera opened the laptop. Nathan Riker. She pulled up files that indicated significant preparation. Creature of habit. Meets his supplier every Tuesday and Friday at a bar called the Dusty Boot on Central. Attorney on Wednesday mornings. Girlfriend's apartment Thursday nights in the South Valley. She looked up. I've been building this since Diesel called the oath. You need to know your problem before you can solve it. Can we prove he hired the shooters? Cole asked. Not yet. That's the gap you're going to help us close. You follow Nathan. Document meetings. Record what you can. Close enough to hear, far enough to be furniture. Think you can do that? Cole thought about 3 months of being furniture, of learning which angles made him visible and which made him part of the background that eyes moved across without stopping. Yeah, I can do that. Good, because the hearing on Sadie's placement has been moved up. Less than 48 hours. We need something concrete before Nathan's lawyer files the motion to make the Foster placement permanent. Holt had been standing against the wall through most of this. He stepped forward now and pulled a small box from his jacket. Inside was a patch, black leather with embroidered text in white thread. Under protection. You wear this visible, Holt said. Anyone in our world sees it, they know what it means. Touching you means war. It's not full membership, but it's a shield, and given what you're about to walk into, you need one. Cole took the patch. It was heavier than it should have been for its size. I don't have a jacket. Vera reached into her bag, pulled out a worn denim jacket with the slightly faded quality of something that had been stored carefully for years. This belonged to my brother before he died. Been in a box for 12 years. He was about your size. I think he'd wanted doing something that mattered. The jacket fit. Della sewed the patch into the back, each stitch deliberate and permanent. When she finished, she stepped back and looked at him with an expression that was difficult to categorize but felt like something being officially acknowledged. Looks right, she said quietly. That afternoon, Della dropped Cole 3 blocks from the Dusty Boot and parked her bike at the far end of the lot with clear sightlines to the entrance. Cole walked the remaining distance with his hands in the jacket pockets and every skill he had developed for being unremarkable, fully engaged. Nathan Riker was easy to find, 35 years old but reading closer to 50. The particular toll of methamphetamine and cascading bad decisions was written in everything from his posture to his skin to the jittery over-alertness of his movements. He sat in a back booth. The transaction he completed in the first 5 minutes was exactly what it looked like. Envelope for a small package. Neither party making prolonged eye contact. Cole had positioned himself 2 booths away, close enough for the audio equipment Vera had fitted to him to capture sound, far enough to be background. He had the phone out the way kids always had phones out in public spaces, which made him invisible in a specific and useful way. Then a second man walked in, and Cole recognized him immediately from Della's description. Average height, a face engineered for being difficult to remember accurately. The kind of presence that did not draw attention because it had learned very specifically how not to. But the eyes were something else, cold, with the professional, coldness of someone who had learned to turn off the specific parts of himself that made things personal. Roman Voss, the hitman who had missed. Their conversation lasted 7 minutes. Cole caught fragments through the audio pickup. Nathan's voice carrying the whine of someone who had never been told no long enough to develop the capacity for it. She survived. You said it was handled. Voss completely flat. The situation was complicated by an unanticipated variable. The job is not finished. Delayed. Nathan, how much more? Voss another 20,000, half up front. Nathan quieter. I don't have that kind of liquid cash right now. Voss, then find it. Or explain to the people you owe why you can't. Your choice. A pause, then Nathan's voice dropping to something uglier. What about the kid, the one who took the bullet? What about him? Could be leverage. She's protecting him. That means she cares about him. We use that. Voss was quiet for a moment. Using a child creates complications. She'll do what I want if she thinks it costs him. He's nobody. No documentation, no family looking for him. Nobody's going to miss him. Cole kept his face completely neutral, kept the phone steady, kept the audio recording. Give me 24 hours, Voss said. I'll put something together. But Nathan, after this we're done. I don't do open-ended arrangements. They left separately. Nathan first. Voss 5 minutes later, walking out with the unhurried pace of someone who had done this many times before. Cole waited until both were gone, then triggered the signal on the panic bracelet. Della arrived in 90 seconds. He played the recording through her earpiece, watched her face go to the particular stillness that faces went to when containing something that would be dangerous if it got out unmanaged. Holt's place, she said, now. The clubhouse was a converted warehouse on the industrial edge of the city. Inside it looked like the intersection of someone's lived-in space and a place that had thought carefully about certain kinds of contingencies. Pool table, a bar that predated most of the members, couches that had survived through sheer stubbornness. Holt was waiting with 15 others, a cross-section of the chapter unified by the same code and the same expression of controlled readiness. Della played the recording. The silence after it landed with weight. Holt broke it. That simplifies things. They come for the boy. We have justification to resolve this permanently. No. Della's voice cut through the beginning of agreement around the room. We do this smart and legal. We use the recording as evidence. Law enforcement. Proper channels. An older member with a scar bisecting his face spoke up. The system that put a 7-year-old with her addict father in the first place. That system. The system that's watching us right now looking for an excuse to confirm every story they already want to tell about us. Della held his eyes. I want Nathan gone. But not if it costs Sadie in the process. We play this smart or we don't play at all. Holt nodded slowly. She's right. We go in loud. We confirm the narrative. We go in smart. We write a different one. What's the play? We let them try to grab Cole. Vera said it with the measured quality of someone presenting a logistical option. We control the situation. Wire him, track him, have people positioned, record everything. Get Voss on camera admitting to the attempted murder. Get Nathan on camera ordering it. Give the DA something they can't ignore. You're using the boy as bait, Holt said. Statement, not accusation. I'm giving him a choice. Those are different things. Della looked at Cole. You don't have to do this. We can keep you safe until the hearing. But if you're willing to help, we can end this permanently. Nathan never threatens Sadie again. Never threatens you again. Cole thought about Iris, about the difference between being safe and being free, about a 7-year-old girl with a gap-toothed grin who deserved better than a father who saw her as currency. I'll do it, but I want something in return. Find Iris, find out where she is, and make sure she gets the same protection you're giving me. Della did not pause. Done. Vera, start the search now. They spent the next 6 hours preparing. Vera fitted Cole with a wire built into a shirt button, a GPS tracker sewn into the jacket lining, and a panic bracelet designed to look like a charity fundraiser ribbon. Everything undetectable at casual inspection, everything functional. Holt positioned his people, surveillance teams on rotating shifts, watchers at elevated positions, riders ready to mobilize in under 2 minutes. A net woven tight enough that reaching Cole would require going through a significant portion of the Brotherhood. Vera found him around 10 o'clock, pulled a chair up beside him. Your sister, Santa Fe foster home run by a woman named Ruth Hayden, been there 4 months. Before that, 6 different placements in 3 years. Files describe her as having attachment difficulties and behavioral challenges. Vera's voice softened slightly. That's how the paperwork describes a child who's learned that getting attached gets you hurt. Is she safe? No abuse flags. Hayden has a clean record, but Iris has stopped trying to connect, keeps to herself, stops talking when things start to feel real. Cole knew what that looked like from the inside. He had built the same walls. Can I see her? Not yet. But after this is done, after we get Sadie back, we go to Santa Fe together. That's the deal. You help us, we help you. He nodded, thought about Iris behind those walls waiting for someone who was taking too long. Della's phone rang just after midnight. She listened. Her face did the thing it had done when she read the note from the shooter's jacket. Hearing's been moved up. Nathan's lawyer filed another emergency motion. They've got photos from the hospital parking lot, 900 bikers, quote, occupying a medical facility in a show of force. They're using it as evidence that Sadie is in immediate danger from my associations. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Vera didn't look up from her laptop. We don't have the evidence yet. Voss hasn't made his move. Then we make him move tonight. Della looked at Holt. Can you leak Cole's location? Make it look like he's alone and accessible? Holt was quiet for a moment. That accelerates the timeline. The variables get harder to control. Everything about this is hard to control. But I'm not walking into that courtroom tomorrow with nothing. I need Voss on tape admitting what Nathan hired him for. I need it tonight. Holt pulled out his phone, made 3 calls, brief and specific. When he finished, he looked at Cole with the steady eyes of someone who believed in honesty about risk. In 1 hour, every low-level operator in this city will know a homeless kid is staying alone at the Maverick Motel on Central. Room 114, one biker on watch who's not paying attention. Will Voss come? If he's smart, probably not. If he's operating under a deadline and running out of options, probably yes. But Cole, you need to understand what this means. We will control everything we can control. We cannot guarantee everything. There are no clean promises in this kind of work. Cole thought about the parking lot, about the moment between deciding to run and running, about what it had cost and what it had been worth. I understand. They moved him to the Maverick at 1 in the morning, a room that smelled like accumulated poor decisions and the ghost of cigarettes from a decade ago when you could still smoke inside. Vera had wired it before Cole arrived. Cameras in the smoke detector and the bedside lamp. Audio pickup sensitive enough to record a conversation across the room. The biker on watch was a woman named Scarlett, who positioned herself in the parking lot with instructions to look inattentive. You see him coming. You hit the panic button before he reaches the door, she told Cole. You are the witness, not the catch. Let us do the catching. Cole sat on the bed and waited. The specific kind of fear that came from sitting alone, knowing something was coming, had plenty of time to establish itself. He kept his breathing slow, kept the panic button within reach, kept his mind on Iris and Sadie and the reason this was worth doing. The door came in at 2 in the morning, not opened, kicked hard enough to splinter the frame. Roman Voss came through in one continuous motion, gun already out, scanning the room with the practiced speed of someone who had done this enough times that the sequence was automatic. He found Cole. His expression was the professional version of unsurprised. Nothing personal, kid. Wrong place, wrong circumstances. You have a value and I have a problem. That's the whole equation. Cole's hand moved toward the panic button. Voss crossed the room faster than seemed possible, grabbed his wrist before the hand arrived, squeezed until the bracelet fell to the floor. Nice instinct. But I've been doing this long enough to recognize the shape of a setup. He produced zip ties with the ease of someone for whom zip ties were standard equipment, secured Cole's wrist behind his back with efficient practice movements. Your people outside have been handled. You're coming with me. If you make any sound, I'll make sure it's the last one. He pulled Cole out into the parking lot. Scarlett was on the ground near her bike, unconscious, wrists and ankles secured. A white panel van idled near the exit. Voss put Cole inside and pulled the doors shut. Through the wire still running in the jacket lining, Cole heard Vera's voice. Clear and steady. We have your location. Units are moving. 2 minutes. Stay calm. The van drove for 3 minutes and stopped in an industrial area, a warehouse district empty at this hour. Voss pulled Cole into a building that echoed with their footsteps, concrete floor, metal walls, every sound repeating slightly before it faded. He secured Cole to a support pillar with a second set of zip ties, checked the bindings, stepped back, pulled out his phone, typed a message, showed the screen to Cole. Tell her she has 6 hours. She drops the custody case, she tells the court she's unfit, she gives Nathan what he wants. Or I leave you somewhere, she'll find you eventually. Clear. Cole nodded. The fear was not acting anymore. Voss stepped away and made a call. Got the kid. Send the message. 6 hours. A pause, then Nathan's voice through the speaker, loud enough for the wire to catch every word. Make sure she knows you mean it. I want her to understand that fighting me has a cost. Do something that shows it's real. Voss was quiet for a moment. The pause was brief, but it was there. That wasn't the original arrangement. The arrangement changed. I'm paying for follow-through. Do it. Voss looked at Cole. Something moved through his expression that had not been there when he came through the motel door. Not quite hesitation, not quite something he was willing to name. Just a calculation that included a variable he had not initially accounted for. I'll handle it, he said. Have the money ready. He hung up, stood still for a moment, then looked at Cole with the eyes of someone deciding whether to say something. How old are you? 11. You have family. A sister. She's in foster care in Santa Fe. I haven't seen her in 3 years. Voss was quiet long enough that the silence had texture. I had a daughter, Vanessa. She was 9 when she died. Drive-by shooting 3 blocks from our house. Nothing personal, that's the phrase they always use. Nobody is ever sorry about anything that was personal. Cole said nothing. I spent 12 years after that trying to fill the space. Took jobs like this one. Told myself that if I couldn't save Vanessa, at least I could be useful at something. He looked at the gun in his hand with something that was not quite the expression of someone who had always been comfortable with what they held. It doesn't fill anything. The space just gets larger. Then why? Because I'm good at it. Because people pay me. Because I convinced myself that if I was going to live in this world, I might as well be honest about what kind of world it is. He paused. But the man who hired me, he has a daughter, 7 years old. He is trying to get custody of her, not because he loves her, but because she has a financial value to him. He looked at Cole. I was going to help a father take a little girl away from the grandmother who loves her. The same thing that happened to Vanessa when someone decided their business was worth more than her being alive. Sadie, Cole said. Voss's jaw tightened. That's the part I didn't think about carefully enough when I took the job. The warehouse door exploded inward. A controlled breach shape charge, turning the metal into a controlled spray that cleared the entrance without fragmenting dangerously inward. 15 people came through in the gap with the coordinated precision of people who had done this before in contexts where hesitation was a problem. Della walked through last, unarmed, moving with the particular calm of someone who had decided what the outcome was going to be and was simply here to let the situation arrive at it. She looked at Voss, at the gun, at Cole secured to the pillar, at the specific architecture of the situation. Let him go. She said it the way you stated something about physics. Voss did not lower the gun, did not raise it, stood between positions, something working in his face that had not been there when he came through the motel door. You were hired to kill a grandmother, Della said. Her voice cut through the warehouse's acoustics like something with an edge. Look at this boy. He lost his sister because nobody stepped in when it mattered. You lost your daughter to the same logic. Someone's goal was worth more than her life. How many more children lose people before somebody says enough? I say enough, and Nathan finds someone who doesn't have my hesitations. Someone who finishes the job without any of this. Then testify. Give us Nathan. Trade what you know for a deal and let the law put him somewhere he can't hurt anyone else. Stop passing the consequences to the next person in line. You think the system is going to handle it. The system didn't save my daughter, didn't save this kid's mother. It's not going to suddenly start working correctly because you believe in it. I'm not asking you to believe in the system. I'm asking you to believe that a father who will pay to murder his own mother should not have custody of a 7-year-old girl. Della took one step closer, slow, completely deliberate. I'm asking you to believe that we can stop him tonight if you choose to help. With what's already recorded and what only you can testify to. She held his eyes, not aggressive, not pleading, just completely certain about what she was asking and why it mattered. Voss looked at the gun, at Cole, at the 15 people who had come through the door, at something that was not quite any of them. Then he set the gun on the concrete floor, stepped back from it, raised his hands. All right, he said. His voice had the quality of a decision that could not be reversed. I'll give you Nathan, but I want a deal in writing before I say anything else. And I want to know the kid's going to be all right. The kid's under sworn protection. Della was already moving toward Cole with her knife out to cut the zip ties. He's going to be more than all right. The police station at 4 in the morning processed what they brought with the focused efficiency of institutions that recognized when something significant had arrived. Vera's recordings were clear. Nathan's voice on the audio ordering violence against an 11-year-old child was the kind of evidence that organized calendars around itself. Roman Voss talked for 3 hours. He gave them the initial contact through an intermediary. The meetings, the payment structure, the note Della had pulled from the first shooter's jacket, which Voss confirmed as authentic and consistent with the arrangement he had been given. The DA on call reviewed what was there and understood what she was looking at. The warrant was drafted by 7. Nathan Riker was arrested at 6:15 in his girlfriend's apartment in the South Valley, still half asleep when the officers arrived, confused about what was happening until they were most of the way through his rights. The charge list was extensive. Conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, child endangerment, kidnapping, the kind of list that did not leave much room for the outcome Nathan had been counting on. At 8:45, Della walked into family court. She had stopped at the hospital first. Cole was awake, sitting up, better than he had been at 4 in the morning, which was not saying a great deal, but was saying something real. She had sat with him for 20 minutes and told him what was happening and watched his face process it. Is Sadie going to be okay? He had asked. That's what I'm going in there to make sure of. Go then, I'll be here. The judge reviewed the police reports, the charges filed that morning, Voss's sworn statement, the audio of Nathan ordering harm to a child. She looked up from the documents with the contained outrage of someone who had been on the bench long enough to have standards and had just watched them get violated in a specific and documented way. Nathan Riker's petition for custody is denied. Her voice was precise. Ms. Riker, you are granted full custody of Sadie Riker effective immediately. Mr. Riker's parental rights are suspended pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. This court apologizes that these circumstances became necessary. Della nodded once, did not speak. Save the release for somewhere it would not be misread. Elizabeth Greer caught her in the hallway. I'll have Sadie ready for pickup in 2 hours. She's been asking for you every single day. Told everyone in that house that her grandmother was coming. Della's throat tightened. Tell her I'm already on my way. She went back to the hospital first. Cole was awake, sitting up the nurse having decided to allow it in measured increments. He looked better than he had at 4 in the morning, which was not saying a tremendous amount, but was saying something real. She told him what had happened, watched his face. What happens to me now? He asked. Once Sadie's back and the case is settled. I filed for emergency guardianship of you last night while the DA was processing Voss. Greer co-signing the application. She paused. The paperwork will take time to formalize. But you're not going back to a street and you're not going back to Gary. You're coming home with Sadie and me, if that's what you want. He was quiet long enough that she let the silence do what it needed to do. And Iris, he finally asked. We go to Santa Fe as soon as you're cleared to travel. She's next. Cole looked at his hands. The IV had been removed an hour ago. The bandaging on his left side was visible through the hospital gown. He looked like what he was, a kid who had been through something significant and was still in the early hours of understanding what came after it. Why are you doing this? He asked. You didn't know me 3 days ago. You took a bullet for me. People don't owe other people their whole lives for one thing. No, but some things create obligations that you don't measure in proportion. You moved when you could have stayed down. You made a decision alone, without backup, without any reason to believe it would be worth it. She leaned forward. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of thing I build around. He looked at her for a long time, reading her the way he had learned to read people on the street, looking for the gap between what they said and what they meant, looking for the tell that indicated this was temporary. Apparently, he did not find it. Okay, he said. 2 hours later, Della pulled up to a house in the Northeast Heights, where a woman named Sandra Keene ran short-term foster placements, with the careful competence of someone who had been doing it long enough to manage both children and crises without losing her equilibrium. Cole was in the passenger seat, cleared for short travel, moving carefully. Sadie came out of the front door before the car fully stopped. 7 years old and moving with the specific urgency of someone who had been waiting and was not going to waste a single second of the arrival on decorum. She hit Della at a run, and Della caught her, absorbed the impact, held her, while the tension in that small body released in stages as the reality of the arrival settled in. I knew you'd come, Sadie said into Della's shoulder. I told them. I said Grandma always comes. Always, Della said. She set Sadie down after a moment. Sadie noticed Cole in the passenger seat, for the first time studying him with the direct curiosity of children who had not yet learned to make their interests less visible. Who's that? Someone special. Della kept her hand on Sadie's shoulder. His name is Cole. He's the reason I'm here right now. Sadie took in Cole's careful movements as he got out of the car, the edge of bandaging visible at his collar. You got hurt. Yeah, Cole said. For Grandma, yeah. Sadie considered this with the gravity that 7-year-olds brought to things that mattered. Then she held out her hand in the formal way children sometimes did when they sensed the moment required ceremony. I'm Sadie. Thank you for keeping her safe. Cole shook her hand. I'm Cole. Do you have any family? A sister. Her name is Iris. Is she nice? I think so. I haven't seen her in a while. Sadie considered this. Maybe you can bring her to meet us. Cole looked at Della. Yeah, maybe soon. They drove back to the house Nathan had tried to inherit. 3 people where there had been one, which changed the acoustics of every room in ways that were not unpleasant. Sadie talked through the entire drive, filling Cole in on the full account of the foster placement with the thoroughness of someone who had been containing a large backlog of narration and had finally found the right audience for it. Cole listened, asked occasional questions, smiled twice, which Della counted. Holt called as they pulled into the driveway. Nathan is looking at life without parole. DA says the recording of him ordering harm to Cole is what makes it airtight. Voss is cooperating fully 15 years with possibility of parole in 10 if he stays cooperative. He took the deal before the ink was dry. Good. And Cole's paperwork. Emergency guardianship is filed. You'll have temporary custody by end of week, permanent by end of month, if all goes as expected. Della looked at Cole. You okay with that living here? Being part of this? Cole thought about the alternatives. The street, the cold, the hunger, the fear that never fully switched off. Thought about Iris in Santa Fe still waiting. Yeah, I'm okay with it. That night, Della made dinner at the kitchen table. Real food cooked from actual ingredients. Sadie talked through most of it, managing to give Cole a fairly comprehensive overview of her entire life while consuming an impressive amount of food. Cole ate with the careful attention of someone for whom food had been unreliable long enough that it still deserved full presence. After dinner, Della pulled out her phone. Vera has the arrangement made. Tomorrow we drive to Santa Fe. We bring Iris home. Cole set down his fork. What if she doesn't remember me? It's been 3 years. Then you remind her. You show her that brothers who disappear sometimes come back. That promises can be remade. She paused. Family isn't only blood. It's who shows up when it matters. Sadie appeared from the living room with a blanket and a stuffed bear that she had apparently decided Cole needed. You can sleep in the spare room. Grandma says you're going to stay. That makes you family. Family shares blankets. Cole took the offered items, felt the specific weight of 7 years old deciding he belonged. Thank you. He slept in a real bed for the first time in months, door locked from the inside because old habits required time to change, but warm fed and with people in the next rooms who would notice if something went wrong. The drive to Santa Fe took 2 hours. Della behind the wheel, Cole in the passenger seat with his hands in the jacket pockets, and everything he wanted to say to Iris arranged and rearranged in his head. Sadie in the back asking questions that nobody had complete answers for. What if she doesn't like me? Sadie asked. Her voice was small in the way it got when she was actually worried about something. She'll like you, Cole said, more hope than certainty. Vera had talked to Iris's current foster mother, told her what was coming. Iris has been packed since yesterday morning, sitting by the window. Cole's throat tightened. She's been waiting. She's been waiting for 3 years. Kids don't let go of that kind of thing. Ruth Hayden met them at the door, 60-ish kind eyes behind reading glasses, the careful weariness of someone who had fostered enough children to know that love was often not sufficient to repair what the world had broken, but gave it anyway. She's upstairs, Hayden said. Been asking me every 10 minutes if you were real. Whether this was going to happen or whether it was another thing that was going to fall through. Cole's chest tightened. Can I see her? Go ahead. Second door on the right. He climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt like moving towards something that could shatter him or rebuild him, depending entirely on what happened in the next few minutes. The door was half open. He knocked anyway, giving her time. "Come in." Her voice, 3 years older, harder at the edges, but still completely unmistakably Iris. He pushed the door open. She was sitting on the bed with the posture of someone who had learned to hold herself at a slight distance from the world, ready to step back from it at any moment. 11 years old now, hair longer than he remembered, eyes that had the particular quality of eyes that had been watching for a long time for signs of what was coming and had not always liked what they found. A small backpack sat at her feet, everything she owned ready to move again, because moving was what foster kids did. They looked at each other, brother and sister separated by 3 years and 1,000 miles of things that had happened to each of them while the other was not there. "You got tall," Iris said finally. "You got old," Cole said. A smile crossed her face, brief, like she had forgotten the exact muscle memory for it and had to work to locate it. "You said you'd come back for me." "I know. I'm sorry it took this long." 3 years isn't long, it's forever. No accusation in her voice, just the plain fact. The way that time moved differently for children, especially children who had been waiting. "I couldn't before, but I can now, and I'm not leaving without you." He paused. "Unless you don't want to come, that's your choice." Iris studied him, saw the stitches visible at his collar, the careful way he moved, the patch on the jacket. "Vera said you got shot, said you saved someone's grandmother." "Yeah. Why?" He thought about how to answer that. "Because I was tired of standing still, tired of watching things happen and doing nothing about them, tired of being the kid who stood in the kitchen and froze." He looked at her. "I wanted to do something right for once, and I did." "Did it work? Are you different now?" "I don't know yet, but I have people now. A grandmother who keeps promises, a little girl who shares blankets with strangers, an army of bikers who decided I mattered." He stopped. "And a sister I've been looking for since the day they took you away. If you'll come with me." Iris picked up the backpack, held it the way she had probably been holding it since yesterday, like a shield and a preparation simultaneously. "Where?" "Albuquerque. Della's house. There's a spare room. She has emergency guardianship papers for both of us. We'd be together. What if it doesn't work? What if she decides we're too much trouble?" Cole understood the fear, had felt it himself, still felt it, sometimes in the quiet moments when his brain tried to insist that permanence was a thing adults promise before they change their minds. "Then we figure it out together." But Della's not like the others. She called in something called the sacred oath for me. 940 bikers showed up because I took a bullet for her. That's the kind of person she is. The kind who keeps the hard promises. "Is Sadie nice?" "Yeah. She's 7, talks constantly, thinks brothers who save grandmothers are heroes. She already decided you're going to love motorcycles." Iris stood, testing, is that normal for her? "Pretty much," Cole said. They went downstairs together, Iris moving with the careful control of someone who had learned that showing excitement created exposure to disappointment. But when she saw Sadie waiting by the door, something shifted. 7-year-old certainty meeting 11-year-old caution. Sadie smiled the way she always smiled, wide and genuine and completely unaware that some people needed time to trust smiles. "You're Iris. Cole talks about you. I'm Sadie. Do you like motorcycles because Grandma has one? And it's really loud but also kind of amazing, and maybe she'll let us ride sometime if we ask." Iris blinked, looked at Cole for context. "She's always like this," he said. "I like motorcycles," Iris said quietly. "I've never been on one." "Then we'll fix that," Della said from behind Sadie. She stepped forward, not crowding, giving Iris space to take in the information at her own speed. "I'm Della. I have a house with 2 spare rooms and a kitchen that has actual food in it. The only promise I'm making is this: you're under protection now. Same as Cole, same as Sadie. Nobody touches you without going through us first. Us, Iris said carefully. 940 of us, Sadie said, give or take. Grandma says it depends on the day. Della's mouth curved slightly. It's a lot to explain. Short version is that you matter now. Both of you. And we don't let go of people who matter. Ruth Hayden appeared with the paperwork, transfer documents, temporary guardianship signatures, the official stamps that transformed Iris from another foster placement into something with a different name. She handed Della a folder: medical records, school transcripts, therapy notes. She's been through 6 placements in 3 years. Each move made trusting harder. She'll test you, push to see if you'll give up. I won't. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. They drove back to Albuquerque with 2 kids in the back. Sadie filled the silence with her usual comprehensive narration of everything she found interesting about the world. Iris listened, occasionally nodded, said very little, watched the desert scroll past, and tried to decide what she believed about any of this. Cole watched his sister in the passenger side mirror, saw the walls she had built, recognized them, knew that taking them down was a matter of time and proof, and not leaving. The house felt different with 4 people in it. Fuller, more complicated, more like something that was becoming rather than something that already was. Della showed Iris the spare room. Plain walls, empty dresser, clean sheets, nothing personal, because personal reminded a foster family that children move through, that nothing was supposed to last. You can decorate however you want, Della said. Paint the walls, hang whatever you like. Make it yours. You're not a guest. You live here now. Iris set her backpack on the bed, did not unpack it. How long? As long as you want. I've filed for permanent guardianship. If it goes through, you're here until you're ready to be somewhere else, on your own terms. People always say permanent, then something changes. Yeah, they do. Della sat on the edge of the bed, not crowding, giving her space. I'm not going to promise nothing will ever be hard. I can promise I won't quit on you. Won't send you back because you're too much work or too complicated, or because I decided something else was more important. She paused. You're Cole's sister. He saved my life. That makes you family by extension. I take family seriously. That's a strange reason to want kids. Most reasons people want kids are strange if you think about them honestly. Della stood. Dinner's at 6. Cole knows where the kitchen is. If you need anything, ask. If you need space, take it. No rules except don't hurt yourself or anyone else. Everything else we figure out as we go. She left, gave Iris privacy. Cole found her an hour later, still sitting on the bed, backpack unopened, working through the situation at her own pace. You don't have to unpack, he said from the doorway. Not until you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then you live out of the backpack, but at least you do it here. Iris looked at him, really looked the way she used to when they were small, and she was deciding whether to trust something he said. Did it hurt? Cole said. Getting shot. Yeah. Was it worth it? He thought about the specific answer, about Della and Sadie and 940 people who had shown up, about sitting here with his sister for the first time in 3 years. Yeah, it was worth it. Dinner was the complicated kind. Too much politeness, too much trying the slightly awkward geometry of people who were learning how much space to take up around each other. Sadie filled the gaps with stories. Della asked careful questions. Iris gave one-word answers and ate more than she had probably been eating in a long time. But she ate. And when Della mentioned dessert, something crossed Iris's face that was very close to surprise. That night, Cole heard quiet crying through the wall, the muffled kind, the kind that had learned to be small so adults would not hear it and get tired of it. He knocked on Iris's door, waited. Go away. He opened it, found her curled on the bed, still in her clothes backpack, clutched like something she could not set down yet. I used to cry every night too, he said. After they took you, after I ran from Gary. Thought if I just felt it enough, something would change. Did it? No, so I stopped feeling things. Went numb because numb was easier than hoping. He sat on the edge of the bed far enough to give her room. But then I met Della and Sadie and people who decided I was worth showing up for. And it hurt worse than the bullet, honestly, because hoping again after you've stopped is harder than the original loss. Iris wiped her eyes. Does it get easier? I've only been doing it for a week. A sound came from her that was almost a laugh, small, brief, but there. She leaned against him, the small gesture of a sister who had not leaned on anything in a long time. They sat in the quiet, not fixing anything, just being present, just proving that neither of them was alone anymore. 6 months passed the way time passed when something was finally working. Not dramatically, not without difficulty, but forward. The way seasons moved insistently and with results that accumulated before you noticed they were accumulating. Cole's stitches came out. The wound became a scar visible above the waistline, a permanent reminder of the night he stopped being invisible. He worked at Holt's garage 3 days a week, learning mechanics with the focused attention of someone who had found something he was good at and wanted to get better. He showed up every time, did the work without being asked to do it twice. The older mechanics stopped explaining things more than once. Iris was harder. She tested the boundaries the way children did when they needed to know whether the boundaries were real or decorative. Stayed out past the time Della had asked her to be home. Skipped school twice in October. Told Della once in a voice calibrated to wound that she was not her real family and did not get to tell her what to do. Della said okay, made dinner. Iris came home early the next day without explanation. The walls came down in pieces over months. A morning Iris said something funny and laughed at Della's response and seemed briefly startled by her own laughter. An afternoon, she and Cole sat at the kitchen table for an hour and a half and talked about things Cole couldn't hear from the other room, but that had the sound of connection. A Sunday, Sadie climbed into Iris's bed at 7 in the morning because of a bad dream, and Iris did not tell her to leave. Nathan's trial happened in month 4. Cole testified. His voice in the courtroom was steady in a way that had cost him considerably more than it showed. Iris sat in the gallery with Della's hand in hers. Sadie was with a neighbor too young for the specifics, but old enough to understand that something important was being decided. The jury took 90 minutes, life without the possibility of parole. The judge thanked Cole on the record for his courage. Cole nodded and did not say that courage from the inside felt mostly like fear that it had decided to move anyway. Voss's plea processed in month 5. 15 years with a possibility of parole in 10 in exchange for complete cooperation. He took it without negotiation. His testimony was comprehensive and precise. The last Cole heard, he was in a facility in central New Mexico and had asked for grief counseling, which the institution had provided. On a Saturday in late spring, Holt called. Tomorrow, desert outside the city, dawn. Della knew what that meant. She told Cole and Iris and Sadie at dinner. Tomorrow we're meeting the full brotherhood. There's a ceremony, a formal acknowledgement of what happened 6 months ago and what it means. Do we have to go? Iris asked. No, but I'd like you to. This is family now. All of them. That's a lot of family. It is, but they show up when it matters. That's the only definition that actually counts. The desert was already holding the first warmth of morning when they arrived before dawn. The sky going from black to deep blue to the first thin line of gold along the eastern horizon. 940 motorcycles arranged in precise rows on the flat ground west of the city, their chrome catching the early light, men and women standing beside them, with the patience of people who had ridden through the night because one of their own had called. A bonfire burned in the center, large enough to be visible for miles. Old tradition. Fire as witness, fire as the element that transformed one thing into another. Holt stood beside it in his full chapter gear. He raised one hand and the assembled voices cut off simultaneously. Brothers and sisters, his voice carried without amplification. We gather to honor something that began 6 months ago in a parking lot in the middle of the night when everything was at stake, and the person who stepped in was an 11-year-old boy with nothing to gain and a great deal to lose. He told it the way it had happened, not all the details, but the shape of it, the essential weight. A grandmother at risk, a boy who had been invisible to everyone, the choice to move when every calculation said stay down, the oath that followed, the 6 months of following through. He turned to Della, pulled a patch from inside his jacket, black leather, embroidered gold thread, a lion's head, fierce and detailed, looking directly forward. Beneath it, 2 words, Grandmother Lion. Della Riker, you were already one of us. Tonight we name what you became. He held the patch out. She turned. Let him sew it onto the back of her vest, each stitch permanent, each one adding weight that was not quite physical. When he finished, she faced the assembly. 940 people. Some she had known for decades. Some she was seeing for the first time. All standing in the same early light, wearing the same code. They tried to take everything, she said. Her voice carried across the desert without effort. My granddaughter, my life. My own son looked at me and calculated that I was worth more gone than present. She let that sit for a moment. They were wrong about the most important thing. They thought I was alone. She looked at Cole. I had an 11-year-old boy who decided that one loud moment was worth more than another year of silence. And everything after that and is what that one decision made possible. Holt turned to Cole. Another patch, silver thread, the same lion's head. Beneath it, Lionheart protected. Cole Merritt, he said the name clearly in the particular way of someone who understood what it meant to make a name real. 11 years old, invisible to the world, failed by every system designed to see him. You ran toward a gun for a stranger. You carried the oath out under circumstances that would have stopped most adults. He held the patch out. This means you are protected. Any chapter, any state, any time. You show this and you get help. No questions asked and no conditions. Cole took it. Della helped him turn. She sewed it onto the denim jacket, the one that had belonged to Vera's brother, the one that was now something different, the one that was his. The assembly stood. 940 people raised their hands to their chests in the salute reserved for moments that required acknowledgement without performance. Silent, deliberate, real. Then Holt turned to Iris. She was standing slightly behind Cole with the careful readiness of someone who had learned to be prepared for most things to be difficult. Holt's voice was quieter when he spoke to her. Iris Merritt, you didn't choose any of this. Didn't choose your brother or what he did or to be brought into this circle because of it. But your brother fought to bring you here. And Della Riker opened a door. That makes you family. He held out a small patch. Under protection, Thorn family. Iris looked at it, looked at Cole, at Della, at Sadie standing beside Della with complete confidence that everything happening was good and right and exactly as it should be. She took the patch. Let Della sew it onto the jacket. She had arrived in Santa Fe with the jacket she had worn through 6 different placements. The jacket that was starting to feel less like something she wore while passing through and more like something that belonged to someone who stayed. The assembly responded with actual noise, not the silent salute, Voices and whistles and the sound of 900 people who had ridden through the night because someone said someone mattered and who were now celebrating what that mattering had produced. Della stood at the edge of the bonfire later when the food had been consumed and the fire had settled into a sustained glow, watching her assembled family move through the assembly, Sadie collecting stories and nicknames with the complete confidence of someone who had never had reason to distrust a room. Iris talking quietly with Vera, showing her something on her phone, the beginning of something that looked like trust being extended carefully. Cole at the fire itself, watching the flames, not trying to manage whatever he was processing. She went to stand beside him. What are you thinking about? The parking lot, the moment right before I ran. He paused. I keep thinking about what it felt like, because it didn't feel like courage. It just felt like fear, like being completely certain something terrible was about to happen and deciding to do it anyway. That's most of what courage actually is. What's the rest? She looked at the desert, at the stars that were beginning to fade as the sky lightened, at the assembly of 940 people who had built their lives around a code that said you showed up for people who needed it. The rest is what you do the day after, and the day after that. The parking lot was one night, but everything after it, that's the actual thing. That's who you are. Cole was quiet for a while. I've been thinking about starting something, he said. A program for kids on the street, kids like I was, teaching them what I learned, how to read situations, how to find real help when you need it, how to ask for it. He looked at her sideways. I know I'm 13, and adults usually tell 13-year-olds to focus on school. You learned everything you know about surviving by doing it. That's not something a classroom produces. If you've got an idea that comes from knowing something the hard way, I think you take it seriously. He looked at her. I could use help building it. I have 940 people who showed up because I called. I think we can find some resources. 18 months after the ceremony, the Grandmother Lion Project had helped its 119th family, an elderly woman in Taos fighting her son for custody of twin granddaughters, a grandfather in Farmington dealing with a daughter who was using his house address without his knowledge for activities that were creating legal complications he had not asked for. Families in the specific impossible situations that the law produced when it treated love as less relevant than blood and paperwork. The program worked because it combined things that did not usually come together. Legal aid funded by the Brotherhood, practical protection that operated as a deterrent, a network that reached across 7 states and could put people on site within hours when a situation required presence, and a woman named Della Riker who had learned the hard way that showing up was the only thing that actually counted. Cole was 14, still in school, which had turned out to suit him better than he would have predicted, partly because consistent sleep and reliable food changed what his brain could do. Still working at the garage. The program for street kids had its second cohort running 12 young people who came twice a week to a space Holt had cleared at the clubhouse, learning the skills that Cole had learned the expensive way. Iris had won second place in a statewide student art competition, which she had described as meaningless and then discussed at length for 3 days. She was applying to a summer arts program in Santa Fe with the careful optimism of someone who had decided that wanting things was worth the risk of not getting them. Sadie was 9. Her junior chapter of the Grandmother Lion Project at her school had 17 active members. She had asked Ella twice when she would get a road name and received the same answer both times. When you earn one. She was working on it. On a Thursday evening in late autumn, Della's phone rang with an unknown number. She almost let it go. Something made her answer. Ms. Riker, Officer Dana Mercer Gallup, PD. We've got a situation. 71-year-old woman, Her adult son is trying to force her to sign over power of attorney, threatening her. She's asking for the Grandmother Lion Project by name. Says she heard you help people in situations like this. Della looked at the clock. 3-hour drive. Early morning tomorrow. A reasonable argument for calling someone closer and getting some sleep. I'll be there in 3 hours, she said. Keep her safe until I arrive. She hung up. 4 faces looked at her from the kitchen table and the couch. Got a call, she said. Woman in Gallup needs help. Iris closed her sketchbook with the deliberateness of someone making a decision. I'm coming. You have school tomorrow. And you have a 3-hour drive alone in the dark. Iris stood. I'm coming. Cole was already standing. Sadie appeared with her jacket. Della looked at them. At this specific collection of people that violence and circumstance and the stubborn refusal to give up had assembled into something that functioned like a family because it was one. All right, she said, let's show her she's not alone. They drove through the desert in a dark and with the stars overhead doing their ancient and different work, and the car full of the warmth and noise and particular sound of people who had chosen each other being in a vehicle together at an inconvenient hour for a reason that mattered. An elderly woman named Ruth Calloway was sitting in her own living room in a house she had owned for 40 years when they arrived. Gray hair in a neat bun, flannel robe eyes fierce despite the fear that had been in them when Officer Mercer found her. Her son was standing across from her with the reasonable, patient voice of someone who had rehearsed the conversation. The voice of someone who had confused access to legal language with being right. My name is Della Riker, Della said, walking in through the door that Officer Mercer opened. Grandmother Lion Project. Mrs. Calloway asked for us. She looked at the son. This conversation is over for tonight. The son looked at her vest, at Cole and Iris and Sadie, at something in Della's face that made him recalculate. This is a family matter. She's your mother. Start treating her like family, or explain to the people coming why you didn't. He left, not gracefully, but he left. 30 motorcycles arrived 40 minutes later. Not 900, but enough. They parked in formation on the street outside Ruth Calloway's house and made the very specific statement that their presence was designed to make, which was that the woman inside now had people willing to show up at midnight on a Thursday, and that this changed the relevant calculations significantly. Cole helped Ruth make coffee for the bikers who had ridden through the night. Iris documented everything with the camera she had started carrying building records of the program's work. Sadie sat with Ruth and talked about school and art and the things that 9-year-olds found interesting, which was the purest form of the comfort they had come to provide, because it made the person who had been terrified feel like someone ordinary enough to have normal conversations with. As dawn painted the desert gold and pink through Ruth's living room windows, Della sat beside her on the couch while Ruth signed nothing and the sun did not return, and the motorcycles held their quiet formation outside. Why did you come? Ruth asked. It's the middle of the night. You don't know me. Because someone helped me once, Della said, and I decided that was worth passing forward. Ruth looked at her hands. He's my son. I didn't want to believe he would do this. I know, my son tried to have me killed. She said it plainly without bitterness. The bitterness had resolved into something simpler and harder over 18 months. Not everyone who should protect us does, but we're not alone in that, and we don't have to face it like we are. Ruth was quiet for a while. Then that boy, the young one who brought coffee, he's yours. He's mine. He lost his parents. He was on the street. He did something for me that I couldn't repay. So I'm trying to repay it anyway. Ruth looked toward the window, toward where Cole was talking to one of the bikers in the early morning light. He looks like someone who finally stopped bracing for the next thing. He's getting there, Della said. They both are. The legal aid lawyer arrived at 8 in the morning. Had the situation assessed and documented, and Ruth's rights clearly articulated before 9. The sun did not reappear. The motorcycles cleared out by 10 in the respectful, orderly way that they always cleared out when the work was done. On the drive back to Albuquerque, Sadie fell asleep against Iris's shoulder. Cole rode in the front seat with his head tilted against the window, watching the desert go by in the morning light. "Does it stop being hard?" he asked. "No." Della kept her eyes on the road. "But you stop being alone in it, that's the part that changes." He was quiet for a while. "I found something in the library last week." A quote. He had memorized it because memorizing things was something his mind did now that it had the room for it. It said that the most radical thing any of us can do is to stay present to what is actually happening in our own lives. She thought about that. "Where's it from?" "I don't know." Wasn't attributed, just written on the wall of the reading room. She thought about radical presence, about the parking lot, about what it had taken and what it had made possible, about Iris asleep in the back with Sadie's head on her shoulder, about 940 people who had ridden through the night because one of their own called and the code said you came. "That sounds right," she said. The miles ran under them. The city appeared on the horizon. Behind them, the desert went on forever in both directions, full of truck stops and rest areas, and all the spaces where the lost and the weary paused between one place and another looking for something that might hold. Some of them found it. That was the part nobody told you in advance. That sometimes in the spaces between everywhere you were supposed to be, in the dark parts between where you started and where you were going, you found the thing that changed what came after. A boy behind a dumpster had seen something and screamed instead of staying silent. That was where all of this had come from. One voice in the dark, one choice to move when every calculation said stay down. One decision to be the version of himself he had wanted to be for 3 years, even if it cost everything he had. It had cost him a bullet and given him a family. Della had done the arithmetic on that many times in 18 months and always arrived at the same place. Some debts could not be repaid proportionally. Some things created obligations that exceeded any reasonable measure of what was owed. The only thing you could do with that kind of debt was to make it mean something, to build something out of it that lasted longer than the moment that created it. She had been building. They had been building, all of them, each in the specific way that their specific history had given them the tools for. Cole with his street knowledge and his ability to see what people needed before they knew how to ask for it. Iris with her art and the particular way she had of making invisible things visible. Sadie with her complete confidence that the world was good and her apparently limitless capacity for making people feel seen. And Della with everything she had learned in 59 years of fighting for the people she loved and refusing to stop even when it seemed like the odds were entirely against her. None of it had been clean. None of it had been the way you would plan it if you were planning from a safe distance with complete information. It had been messy and terrifying, and sometimes it had nearly gone wrong in the ways that she could not think about too directly even now. But it had worked, and it was still working. She pulled into the driveway. Sadie stirred. Iris stretched. Cole sat up from where he had dozed off against the window. "Home," Della said. The word landed the way it had started to land over the past months. Not as a neutral descriptor of a physical location, as something with weight, with meaning that it had accumulated through daily practice. They went inside. The house that Nathan had tried to inherit that Roy had built, that had been the site of a custody battle and a murder plot, and was now full of the noise and complication and warmth of 4 people who had assembled themselves into something that held. Della started coffee. Cole sat at the kitchen table and opened his school bag. Iris set her camera on the counter and started reviewing the photos from the night. Sadie appeared with a very specific request about breakfast that had clearly been developing in her mind during the drive home. Outside, the morning was fully underway, the desert going gold and warm and ordinary, in the way that mornings did when the crisis had passed and what remained was just the life that had to be lived in the aftermath of it. A boy had screamed in the dark and an army had answered. A grandmother had honored an oath that did not expire. A family had assembled itself from broken pieces and decided to be something stronger than the sum of what had broken it. That was not the whole story. The whole story was still being written in garages and courtrooms and hospital waiting rooms and late-night drives to cities where someone had called for help. In a program that met twice a week with kids who needed someone to show them how to survive and eventually how to do more than survive. In a junior chapter run by a 9-year-old who had decided that helping was a thing you started now and did not wait to be old enough for. In all the mornings that came after the night when everything had nearly ended and instead became the beginning of something else. Della poured the coffee, set a cup in front of Cole, sat down across from him. He looked up from his work. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. He meant it. She believed him, which was its own kind of arrival. "Good," she said. "Drink your coffee, then get to school." He drank his coffee, then he went to school. She watched him go from the window, watched him walk down the street in the denim jacket with the patch on the back, moving forward in the specific, unhurried way of someone who had somewhere to be and knew it. One voice in the dark, one choice to move. Everything after that was just honoring it.